Good morning. My name, if you can hear me okay, is Carolyn Wood Calkins. Some of you have heard this disembodied voice over the phone. And my co-conspirator, C2, Carolyn Swayze White. And we're going to do more on that in a little bit. I'd like to do some further introductions, especially to Councilwoman Segerman Delane. Thank you for being our hostess.
You're welcome.
And I believe you had a few comments you wanted to make.
Well, thank you for our guest speakers. I'm very anxious to thank you for being here, everyone. I'm Delane Sigerman. I'm on the City Council for Kerrville, and I love trees. This has been devastating in so many ways, and so we're here today because we're interested in making that picture look a little different gradually over time. It won't happen overnight, but I'm confident it will happen in some way coming forward. So today we have an opportunity to visit with Barry Ward, Casey Williams, and Michael Eason, who are experts in talking about trees and how to replace them, replant them, and take care of them. So I have a lot of questions, and I've been saving them for today. I could have probably got some answers in advance, but I wanted everyone to hear the topic of how to do this, how to pull this off, how to do this well, so that we don't lose any of these precious trees that we might be able to have. So that's my comment, and thank you so much, Carol, for putting this on. Both of you, your team, thank you very much.
And someone, I believe it was Casey, when he heard the disembodied voice, said, well, who are you with? And all I could say was the Tybee High School class of 1967. And I will explain that momentarily. I'd like to give some recognition to some key stakeholders. The first one, if you just raise your hand or stand, whatever you're comfortable doing. Cindy Stacy Yonke, representing Hunt and the Hunt Garden Club. Sarah Lick, there you are, representing Ingram, the Ingram Fire Department. Volunteer, I should probably add. Thank you for being here. Her chief is Diana Backus, and I've really enjoyed getting to know her. You'd want her at your back, okay, or leading actually. I don't believe that Mr. Holt from Centerpoint Volunteer Fire Department is here. He may come in late. We have been in touch and we'll maintain that. Acknowledgements, I'd like to acknowledge our mayor, Joe Herring. When Carolyn and I had this idea, we went to him. He gave us his go ahead, sent us Delane, and that's how we ended up here. I'd also like to acknowledge our county judge, Judge Kelly, if you'd raise your hand. Thank you for being here this morning. Someone who's not here is Jack Swayze, Carolyn's brother. When we started on this journey, he introduced us to Barry, and connections were made. Daniel Oppenheimer is not here. His representative is coming with Hill Country Alliance. Introduced us to Michael. Michael introduced us to Casey. Mm-hmm. And those are your connections.
It's that networking.
Huh?
It's the networking.
That's big networking. And so, under housekeeping, Q&A will come after all the speakers have spoken. The mic there is live. Please keep your notes. As far as facilities, feel free to leave. You'll go out at this door, take a right, and then take the first right down that hall if you need that. And we have water if you get thirsty. And Casey, I'm like you, I can't stand still for the morning, okay?
And I might have to get up and dance around.
So if I walk out in front of here, bear with me. And so, how did this happen? I'll make it as brief as I can. After all that has happened, I called Carolyn and I said, let's get our class together and gather money and let's plant some trees. And here we are today. And we still haven't gotten to our class. But y'all are all here, and you're going to hear from some really big experts. Carolyn and I have known each other since the 2nd grade. Stan, my husband, also 2nd grade. We all graduated high school together, so we're all local. And those trees and that river, when you drive by it for 60 plus years, I'm not going to say how many it really is, you get used to them. And when something happens to them, you feel it. And I'll quote Amy Grant, who was here and did a concert for volunteers. She said, boy, coming in, I saw some tortured trees. And I thought she put it pretty well. And that touches all of us when we see our trees like they are. Not to mention the loss of life of some little girls. We'll hold them in memory today and in our hearts. We're going to try to make this a little bit fun and light and give you information and see what y'all want to do with it. That's our goal today. And that's our backstory. Did I leave anything out? No. Okay. She keeps me straight. So, that being said, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Barry Ward, the Executive Director of Trees for Houston. He's an arborist. You've been with them since 2008?
2008, yes, ma'am.
It's a 41-year-old organization, right? And this organization, this coming February, will plant their 1,000,000th tree. So, yay. Barry.
Well, thank you for having me. So I don't have a presentation per se. I'm really here to introduce myself and to make myself available and our resources available. So as she mentioned, Trees for Houston is a well-established, primarily a regional nonprofit. So we are certified. We have an IRS determination letter. We file our 990s, and we get an independent audit every year. And we primarily, about 80% of our work is done in about 10 counties surrounding the Houston area. We have a DBA that we filed in 2008 as Trees for Texas. Even back then, the writing was on the wall that for every Tree Folks or Trees for Houston or the Dallas Tree Trust, there's Waco and there's Corpus and there's various towns that just don't have a group like us. So we wanted to make sure, and so many of particularly our corporate partners, they have business interests. Our board members and our public supporters have family and homes in the Hill Country. So there's an impetus from our donors to make sure we're available as needed for places outside of Houston. So we have this DBA. We've had it for 17 years now of Trees for Texas. And so our Trees for every year we try and make sure we're doing something somewhere that's not Houston. This year our plan is Odessa, Midland, and then this came up, and so we're diverting to Kerrville as and if needed as well. And so she mentioned Jack Swayze, a board member emeritus, and a fine forester himself, degreed forester himself, came to me and wanted me to be involved as needed and as y'all want in the Kerrville area. So Trees for Houston, we typically will plant maybe 30,000 trees a year. We'll give away another 30 to 40,000. We peaked at a little over 100 a couple of years ago. It was too big for us at our current size. It's not really fiscally sustainable. We're going to settle, I think, on a sweet spot probably of about 70,000 trees per year. And the methodologies, the modalities of how we plant are widely varied depending on the context of what the need is. Parks and schools are our sweet spot. I'll do 30 or 40 schools at no cost to the school this year. We'll do parks. All of the money we spend is privately raised. We don't spend a dime of tax dollar. So if anybody has worries and of course our 990s are all online. You can look at my taxes if you need them. So it's just easier for us. We're small, we stay nimble, and we work. If we're doing a school, I just work with a school, and I go in and I just plant the trees. If we're doing something in the sub or ex-urban area that's riparian habitat restoration or more forestry-like rather than urban forestry, we almost always are working with flood control, Texas Parks and Wildlife, whatever the appropriate entity is. We are not uninformed or uneducated about those types of plantings, but we are also not subject matter experts on that, and we get that. And so we partner almost everything we do. We have a partner entity or organization of some way. We really see ourselves as a force multiplier, and that's what I would like to offer up to you all. I realize we're Trees for Houston. We're not Trees for Kerrville. I don't want to, would never want to come here and seem imperious, and this is what you should do, and this is what I think you should do. I want to make whatever resources I can garner based on the need that you all determine to support that in any way I can and we can. And I have board members that are very interested in doing whatever the boots on the ground here feel is the appropriate response for this, and what is obviously a very traumatic time for all of us. My daughter was here at camp when all of that happened, so very unpleasant stuff. And again, in a spirit of cooperation and collegiality, we really just want to let you all know that if you don't need us, that's fine. If you need us, I'll do whatever I can to get done what the best minds here determine is what is the best and highest use of our collective resources. So, and I'm happy to take any questions whenever that time is appropriate. So, thank you.
Our next speaker is Casey, and
Yeah.
he
there you go.
has something on the screen for you. Casey Williams.
All right. So my name's Casey. I've been an aquatic ecologist professionally for 13 years. Went to Texas State University for aquatic biology as a undergrad and went back for my master's degree in aquatic resources. Generally, my project expertise has been in the Edwards Aquifer, Comal, San Marcos, the Lower Guadalupe, where we've done a lot of restoration projects for the Habitat Conservation Plan for Edwards Aquifer Authority. We also do wetland plantings and some other smaller projects for City of New Braunfels, City of San Antonio. So generally, my expertise is aquatic plants, aquatic herbaceous plants, although I do know a lot about trees and generally fishes, invertebrates, and just general river ecology. So I wanted to, this presentation is going to be a learning presentation. We're going to learn some terms so that when you interact with Texas Parks and Wildlife biologists or some other biologists and they speak in some terms, you'll maybe understand what they're saying, or maybe you'll know more than they do. And so you can bring up some information and ask educated questions. That's really the most important part. So rivers speak. Rivers tell you something. For the Guadalupe River, not unlike most rivers, they are conveyor belts for sediment and nutrients. And so a healthy river will move sediment and nutrients from its headwaters down to the mouth, down to the bay. That is a normal process of a river. And when we have start getting impeded rivers and impaired rivers, you start getting a lot of sediment buildup, which is bad. Then when you have flash flood events like this, these large geological events, you have no sediment. All the nutrients have been washed out. And that's a problem when you're trying to revegetate a river. You suddenly have no sandbank, you have no silt, have no organic matter. And when you're trying to get plants to grow in a compressed time frame, that's a problem. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. The cool thing about the Guadalupe is it links multiple ecoregions, at least 3 or 4. It starts obviously in the center of the hill country, Edwards Plateau. It ends in the Gulf Coastal Plains. So I've been from the headwaters of the Guadalupe River down to the mouth. Every little part of the Guadalupe River is amazing. Every part has unique aquatic plant communities, unique riparian communities. So the Guadalupe, I think, compared to any of the other rivers in Texas, it's kind of that middle river between the rivers in the west and the rivers in the east. It has so much more diversity than pretty much any other river I know of. So we want to protect that diversity, but we also want to make sure that whatever we plant, whatever we bring in, fits this ecoregion and the surrounding, connects with the surrounding ecology and doesn't really screw it up. So when we do restoration in 5 or 10 years, everything's grown in. We don't want anything to be out of place. We want it to look like it did below the river, above the river, maybe like it did 10 years ago. So that's important. The Guadalupe is a water source, as y'all know. I'm sure most of y'all get your water from the Guadalupe River. It is also what we call a losing stream, which means it recharges the Edwards Aquifer. That's super important. And when we do restoration and we're looking at getting natural function back, one of the big things is how to improve groundwater recharge and Edwards Aquifer recharge. And so we'll talk about engineers later, but there seems to be this, a lot of times when you have a catastrophic flood, engineers come in and they want quick fixes. People want quick fixes, hardened structures, lots of concrete. None of that contributes to groundwater recharge, and all of that will lessen the recharge ability for the Guadalupe to feed into the Edwards Aquifer and any other minor aquifers, and even just groundwater in general. So as we recharge, we're looking at getting biomass back to act as a filter and to act as a recharge function. The Guadalupe River is habitat for multiple unique endemic species, several freshwater mussels. 3 or 4 of them have just been listed as endangered or threatened. It's home to the Guadalupe bass, endemic bass species for Texas. Likes these spring-fed, fast-flowing rivers. So we need to take that into account. We want to protect that habitat and see if we can get that habitat function back for these unique species. And then the other thing with rivers and healthy rivers is that they filter the water. As the water flows down the river, it should become cleaner and clearer. And as we discharge wastewater into the river should act as a filter for wastewater. And so when you have impaired rivers, both of those functions are lost. They lose the function to filter even rainwater and surface water runoff, and they definitely lose the function to filter wastewater. And as we're relying more and more on our rivers for wastewater, putting wastewater into our rivers and recycling our water, we want healthy rivers to filter our wastewater, especially high nitrogen and high phosphorus wastewater. So we'll go through some terms. How many of you have lived on the river your whole life? Okay. So these are some terms that hopefully you may not have known your whole existence on the river, but now you will know them. Riparian habitat. So riparian habitat is any habitat. It can be trees, it can be a grassland, it can be a marsh, anything that is adjacent or connected to a river, any habitat. A lot of people, as y'all go through the tree reforestation process, you will hear riparian trees, riparian habitats, but riparian doesn't necessarily have to be trees. A lot of people think that, but you can have a healthy riparian grassland, not to discount the tree people, but you can have a healthy riparian grassland, you can have a healthy riparian marsh, you can have a healthy riparian yucca garden if you wanted it, as long as it's connected to or adjacent to the river. That is riparian. Littoral habitat is the edge habitat where the land part meets the water. So generally these are very narrow habitats. You can call them marshy or aquatic habitat. Littoral, healthy riparian or a healthy river will have lots of like littoral shelves, which is like a shallow bank. These are generally areas where you'll swim or you'll fish, if you're familiar with those areas. So it's what we call the ecotone between the upland habitats and the aquatic habitats of the river. Littoral habitat is important to protect the stream edge. Unfortunately, I think a lot of our littoral habitat has probably been rearranged and moved. And so the littoral habitat really protects the whole bank. You have healthy littoral habitat, you're going to have healthy riparian habitat. If you lose your littoral habitat, your riparian habitats are going to be impeded. So not only do we want to rebuild our riparian habitat, we want to also focus on our littoral habitats. Now, benthic habitats, these are habitats that are within the channel of the river, and unfortunately, generally these can sustain heavy flooding because most of the velocity rises above them. But in this instance, with this geological flooding event, I'm afraid a lot of our benthic habitat has been disturbed. And so benthic habitat, this is where you see your aquatic invertebrates, those unique fish species, the Guadalupe bass, our stream fishes, and our mussels. That's where you see those. Benthic habitat usually, and the Guadalupe especially, is kind of that bare cobble, rocky substrate, also the bare bedrock, limestone bedrock. So super important, it's important that that habitat not be disturbed, both from flooding and from cleanup. Unfortunately, I think we've probably already disturbed it with the emergency cleanup situation. But any areas that survived emergency cleanup and people driving across the riverbed, we need to try and keep those substrates intact. That's where we're going to find the mussels, and that's also habitat for the Guadalupe bass. So, and there are ways to repair the benthic habitat, and I'm not really going to get into that any deeper because we'll have to, that's further down the road when Parks and Wildlife comes in and starts doing their assessments. Then there's riparian seed bank. So the issue with geological events like this is that you lose a lot of your seed bank. Seed banks are when the plants and the trees drop their seed, it goes into the soil, it sits in the soil, and those seeds can sit there for a year, they can sit there for 10 years, until the conditions are right and they produce the seedlings and the saplings to revegetate after disturbance or revegetate yearly to make a new size class or a new new annual trees. But when you get a large event like this, your riparian seed bank is, for a lot of species, I'm sure a lot of species have been completely washed away. These shallow rooted species that just can't hold on, they're gone, their seed bank is gone. And so that really increases the need for revegetation efforts for some of these shallow rooted trees and shrubs and plants. All right, any questions so far? Okay, so now y'all are all very smart people, or smarter than 80% of the public.
Carolyn has something.
Yes, Carolyn.
I want to thank you for explaining riparian.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, well, it's a term that gets bantered about without really people actually understanding what it means.
Thank you.
And like I said, a lot of people immediately connect it to trees, and it's not. So the main parts of a river, these are structural parts as well as habitats, are your riffle runs and pools. You've all know this. You just haven't put a name to it. You've swam in a pool. You've lounged in a run. You've played in a riffle. But the riffles are generally the fast flowing. Those are the shallow areas where the water is moving fast, and you have all of your water moving over your cobble substrate and your gravels and things. Your riffles are the fast moving part of the river. Your runs are those long areas where the water is slow, usually they're deep. That's the good spots where we kayak and canoe and swim. Those are runs. And then at each end of a run or a riffle, sometimes you'll get a pool. And a pool is that deep part of the river, usually on a bend where the river's circling around, and it kind of erodes and makes a swirling motion you'll see in the water current. Those are all pools. And so all of this habitat is important to specific invertebrates and specific fishes, specific mussel species, plant species. It's important to protect these habitats. If they've been disturbed or extirpated in any way, we'll want to try and get these back into the river. These are all parts of a healthy river. There are ways to restore them. Over time, the river will create these habitats back if it's been lost. But in times when you have, again, these large events, sometimes the river doesn't quite heal itself entirely and it needs some help. So run, riffle, pool are clear habitats and clear geological and hydrological structures of a river. Any questions on that? So your mussels are going to be generally in a riffle. Your Guadalupe bass are going to generally be in a riffle and a run. And then your largemouth bass and other deep water fishes will be in pools. Pools will generally have a lot more sediment and algae and things. So the riverbed. Riverbed goes back to this benthic, the benthic habitat. In the Guadalupe riverbed, this part of the Guadalupe at least, is made up of large cobble, gravel, small pieces of sand, bedrock. The riverbed is an important habitat for your stream fishes, shiners, minnows, freshwater mussels, Guadalupe bass. It's important to protect these the riverbed from driving over it, dredging, manipulating it in any way. So if you see areas of the river where the riverbed looks like it may have survived, hasn't been driven over, someone hasn't really disturbed it or dug it out yet, please mark that off and make a mental note and tell someone, hey, this area I don't think is disturbed. Because eventually what Parks and Wildlife and some other organizations will come in and do, hopefully, they will come in and start doing mussel surveys and looking to see if these mussel communities are back and survived at all. Guadalupe bass surveys, they'll start doing those. Stream fishes surveys to see how those communities have been impacted. So it's important to know the areas that have been left alone and may actually be historical and not disturbed, and areas that may just be complete lost causes. Any questions on that? Okay, the bank toe. So the bank toe again kind of correlates to the littoral edge of the river. This is where the water meets the bank. So where you have a bank, and then you'll have this strip of erosion, or sometimes you have an undercut bank toe. Sometimes you'll have a sandy beach. Sometimes you'll just have this vertical bank. All of that is considered different types of bank toe. So the bank toe is extremely susceptible to hydraulic forces and erosion, especially in events like this. And these are areas that we definitely want to protect and stabilize first, because the bank toe, a stabilized bank toe, means you'll have a stabilized upper bank and upper terraces for tree revegetation. Bank toes, we want to watch for accretion. So that's where the bank toe is actually kind of building out with buildup of sediment. What we don't want to see, although erosion is a natural process, but we don't want to see too much erosion of the bank toe, because that means you're starting to lose your bank. And so as the river begins to normalize itself, you'll start seeing accretion and erosion. We'll want to make notes of that. Areas where there's just too much erosion, we'll definitely want to focus on those areas for revegetation with littoral plants and maybe some shorter woody plants. Areas with accretion are great areas for revegetation immediately. And areas of accretion generally have a lot more nutrient and organic buildup. So they're good areas to focus on for revegetation. Riverbank terraces. So if you've ever been up and down a bank or a riverbank, you'll know that there's these different levels of elevation along the river. A lot of times they'll have different plant communities. you all know what ordinary high water mark is. Generally, ordinary high water mark is the first river terrace. The second and third river terrace, if the river has a third river terrace, are just cut out from larger floods. But understanding your riverbank terraces, your elevation, your slopes, is really important for determining what plants are going to go where, especially trees and shrubs, because certain tree species will go only on the upper terraces. Certain tree species will go on your lower terraces where there's more water availability. And so it's really important to understand the terraces, understand if the terraces are stabilized or if they're going to move. If you've revegetated a terrace and maybe it moves, then you've just lost all of your plants. So understanding the terrace stability is important. Understanding what the terrace organization is important. Problem with the Guadalupe now is that it's probably reorganized some of its terraces and rebuilt some terraces and lost others. So we just have to go in and do an assessment, just basic observations on what terraces are stable, probably what terraces may not be stable quite yet. We can't really plant on what terraces have not been manipulated or changed in any way. And that will just go back into the planting plan. If you don't have terraces, and like this part where it has the likely degraded state where you're getting undercut banks, those are areas where we definitely need to focus on some sort of natural shoreline regeneration, which we'll get into next or later. So parts of a river, the thalweg. So you can all go home and say, I know what a thalweg is now. The thalweg is the current of the river. This is the highest part, the highest velocity of the river. So when you're looking down the channel, you'll see slower moving water along the edges of the bank, and you'll see that fast moving part in the river. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's on one side or the other. And where the thalweg is really going to depend on erosion and accretion. And it's also going to depend on what's vulnerable to destabilization and what's stable. So understanding where the thalweg is, in a river like this where we've just had a huge disturbance, the thalweg may be all over the place. It may be divided. The channel may have divided itself, so you have the thalweg going in two different directions or splitting. You may have where the thalweg was on river left, maybe now it's all the way on river right. And so just again, basic observations of where the thalweg is and what parts of the river are stable, what parts are not, is very important. So I came up with the river plan. It's a cool little acronym that we can all remember. So the first part of the plan is resiliency. We want to plan and improve for future events. Yes, there are going to be more floods. We hope to get some smaller degree floods to bring in more sediment and more nutrients to kind of fill in the areas that are devoid of nutrients and silt and sediment. We want to think of ways to improve the river so that it can withstand some of these larger floods in the future. Integration. How many of you are engineers? Are there any engineers in here? So generally engineers love concrete and they love steel and they love hard things. And especially if you're FEMA or your Army Corps of Engineers, they're thinking of flood conveyance, how fast he can get the floodwaters downstream. That's all great, but it doesn't really help us with our filtering and our ecology and some of our ecological function. So when you hear an engineer talking about, oh, we want to concrete this area or we want to concrete this bank, let's slow down and let's think about how we can integrate those engineered designs with some natural designs. There are ways to do it. You can just Google natural river design and you'll see all kinds of cool pictures on how to integrate engineered concrete hardscape with some natural plantings and things like that. Engineers aren't generally creative, so we need to bring the creativity to the engineers when they say, oh, we're gonna cover this in concrete. Versatility. what works in one part of the river is not going to work in the other parts of the river. So we want to rely on multiple methods and tools. Some of that will be engineering, some of that will be completely natural design, some of it will be intermixed. Some species that will do well in some parts of the river won't do well in others. Everything's going to be different. So we need to understand that from the beginning. We need to be versatile. The river is naturally versatile, and so we want to continue that ancient function, versatility. Ecology. Remember the living pieces. As things get things get built back, and again the engineers come in and say they want to engineer the river, engineer design. Most of the time, especially with engineers, ecology is completely forgotten. Concrete dries in a matter of days, and your problem's solved. Ecology takes longer, and so a lot of times it's forgotten because it takes too long. People aren't patient to wait for ecology, but ecology is what gives you the function. Ecology gives the river its function. So if we forget ecology, we've forgotten basically what the river is supposed to do. Restoration. So restoration is it is a subjective term. What do you restore the river back to? We're not going to restore the river back to how it was 100 years ago. We might be able to restore it back to how it was 10 or 20 years ago, maybe when it was healthier. Restore back to times when it was not as developed, not as organized and cleared off. I don't know what that is, but we will move forward with restoration. We'll figure that out, and we want to look back, and if you have old pictures of the river from your grandparents or your parents or when you were a little kid, now's the time to pull out those pictures and see what the river looked like 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. And that will go a long ways. So get out those pictures. Let's reminisce and look at what was growing on the river 30 years ago. So some ecological restoration techniques. I could go on a whole hours-long class on ecological restoration. We're not going to do that. But I just want to mention and throw out some ideas on how to go about this, and we'll figure out the specifics later. But first and foremost, we definitely want to look at bank and toe stabilization. In areas where we can, we want to use natural materials. These are root wads, these are logs, any clean woody debris, mulch, leaves, anything like that. And generally the idea is to use these materials to harden but softscape the edge of the river and move the thallweg away from the bank. So if the thallweg is close to the bank and it's eroding, which is what gives you that vertical bank there, we want to use root wads and tree limbs and tree branches to move the thallweg further out into the river and protect the bank. We want to turn hardscape into softerscape. So if areas have been concreted and we can do away with the concrete, maybe use gravel or cobble and plant trees within that, or do something like that. That is a better function. Concrete does not allow any ecological function at all. At least gravel and cobble banks allow some sort of ecological function if we have to. Again, natural shoreline design, we want to move away from these degraded banks, maybe concrete or just completely eroded, and we want to move more towards these healthier banks using brush. You can use coconut core logs to put along the bank and fill those in with vegetation over the years. Those will protect banks. The brush mattresses and fiber logs and plantings are great, very quick and easy methods to improve a bank toe or stabilize a bank toe, and they grow in quite quickly. So you'll have within 1 or 2 years, you'll have good littoral plantings. And then you can worry about the revegetation up the bank. Again, this is just a picture of some natural shoreline design where they've incorporated root wads and woody debris into the toe, again, to move the thalweg away from the bank. Root wads and woody debris, that debris is perfect habitat for Guadalupe bass. They love that. They love that habitat. So not only are we moving the thalweg away from the bank and protecting the bank, we're also providing good habitat for our Guadalupe bass and largemouth bass and any of your other stream fishes that occur in deep water. So basically, with restoration and natural ecological designs, you're getting three or four functions with one event versus just filling in it with concrete. You're getting one function, which is stabilizing and hardening your bank. So what do we do with these river scours? This is right below Hunt. These are going to be tough. These are areas that we are going to need to protect. It's going to be really hard to plant things like these, like this spot immediately, because there is no sediment, there's no organic matter, there's no carbon. On a sunny day, that's probably 105 degrees off that rock. So if you have areas like this on your property and you have access to mulch or leaf litter or straw or hay, anything organic, you'll want to move that material onto these scars and try and protect them as best you can. And eventually that will hopefully gather, if we get some smaller floods and higher water events, that will gather sand. So by the time we're planting, they're in a little bit better shape. But right now, those would be hard. So the question is, and we hit this on the Blanco when the Blanco flooded in 2015. Well, when's the river going to be back? What can I expect? And we know from the Blanco, and the Blanco, mind you, the Blanco reached 400,000 CFS in 2015, which is the amount of water in Mississippi. The Blanco, the CFS the Blanco hit was just amazing. And if you look at the Blanco now, 10 years later, and it has recovered most of its function. It's missing the large trees like it had, but you get lots of recruitment. So the question that y'all have is, when can I expect the river to be back to normal? It's a harder answer, but this is kind of a timeline to give you some hope. First two growing seasons are going to be slow because we have no organic detritus. You'll see weedy plants and annuals pop up from the seed bank. These will be plants that will be blown in with the wind. Some of those will be good, some of those will be bad. We want to, if it's brassica, what's the mustard? Bastard cabbage. If it's bastard cabbage, we want to hand pull that. If it's something native, that's fine. First 2 years will be great to jump on arundo. We're going to see arundo pop up. We'll see elephant ears pop up. First 2 years will be a great time to try and jump on those, kill anything that survived, and then remove anything that might have gotten washed in and trying to establish. Third growing season, you'll start seeing perennial plants. They'll be sparse, but these will be plants that maybe the seed bank survived, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what survived in the seed bank. What survived in the seed bank, maybe what has blown in or come in with birds. So third year, you'll start seeing some more perennial plants, but it's going to be sparse. Fourth to fifth years, you will start seeing noticeable recovery as seed makes its way back in with birds. There will be plants that were here that may not make their way back. And so that's where the revegetation part is going to come in. But fourth to fifth year, you'll start seeing some noticeable recovery. Fifth plus, you'll start seeing, it'll be accumulative. You'll start seeing a lot more stuff come in, and you'll start determining whether the bank is stabilized itself, whether it needs to be stabilized in the future. The river by then probably has been normalized. And so by year 5, we'll determine whether we need to do some sort of further interventions with bank stabilization or leave it alone. Now's the time to start getting your cameras out or your phones out and doing photo points. And what a photo point is you mark a point with a T-post or some sort of post along the river or above the river somewhere that's interesting, and just take a picture once a month, quarterly, every 3 months. And you get those photo points, and as you accrue those photo points over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, you'll start seeing how your little plot is changing. That's really informative. And it offers some hope to the heart, because in 5 years you'll look back at your point and be like, oh, Lord, I thought this was going to look like this forever. It won't. In 5 years you'll be happy to see that progress. So that's a good biologist, is using photo points to determine how your ecology and biology is progressing. So the whole point with the replanting initiatives is to kind of speed up this process. But nature has its own process. Nature has its own timeline. We can plant a bunch of plants, but nature, in essence, is the referee. It's going to determine what survives and how fast or how slow we progress. All right, we were just here to provide seed bank for plants that may not have a seed bank anymore, and try and get some quick recovery in areas that need it. So I'm an aquatic plant person, so we're going to go over and look at some aquatic plants. Michael can talk more about the trees. I know y'all all want to see trees, but these things are plants that are probably going to pop up, or maybe planted with some other revegetation efforts in the littoral zone. Sagittaria, Delta duck potato, water willow. You've all seen water willow, you just never knew it. It's a very common along the Guadalupe. Biden's laevis is a really good middle succession plant. Loves the littoral zones, loves the aquatic habitat. Great for fall. It's really good for fall pollinators, monarch migration. Blooms in the fall. White top sedge will probably be one that will be planted for revegetation efforts on some other projects. Emery sedge is another good bank stabilizer and colonizer for river edges. And then 3-square bulrush is another littoral plant that will probably be planted. Great for nursery habitat for fishes, invertebrates, and birds. All right. That is all I have. Y'all have any questions? You have my email. If you have any questions that pop up in your head over the next months or years, feel free to email. I'm here to help in any way I can. So.
I've got one question just while we're here.
Yes, sir.
About shade.
Yeah.
You mentioned the tree thing, and it wasn't required for that to be healthy. If losing these big trees, I mean, could you speak to that and that lost canopy and shade? Is that a factor at all?
It can be, especially if we continue in drought and we're at a lower CFS, and we've lost all that shade canopy. It will affect the stream fishes for sure. Guadalupe bass can move. The larger fishes, so your Guadalupe bass and your largemouth bass, they can move up and downstream. Yeah, they do. And they'll find their areas in deeper water in the pools. The stream fishes, so your smaller minnows, those will probably be more susceptible to water heating. The other thing with water heating is it also gives you solar radiation for algae blooms. So that's one thing we'll want to watch out for, is these mass algae bloom events. Thankfully, hopefully, the nutrient source for the algae is limited. But over time, as people fertilize in the next growing season and all that nitrogen and phosphorus comes back, I would expect algae blooms next year. We want to be on top of that and watching those. So yeah, canopy is a big thing, but you can provide shading by using those root wads and incorporating those into the bank. Those will provide some lower shade. Using the littoral plants provide shade. So just supplementing it until the trees, you get your canopy structure back, if ever. There are other ways to do that.
Yeah. The vast majority of woody debris, organic material, mulch, root wads, all of that is being cleared through what you would probably describe as an engineer's approach right now.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose for that, and there's an
Right.
efficiency with that right now.
Right.
There's also an opportunity to use that material that might be regarded in some perspectives as trash.
Right.
In your perspective, it's not. Is there any effort in this initiative to engage with TDM and FEMA to try to convince them to utilize that material that they are now hauling off and out of the county?
Right. That's not. I don't know. Carolyn, or
I would have to turn it,
yeah.
Council
That's
Woman.
one thing we need. So
it needs to be addressed.
I understand the reason that they were hauling off the debris now is because it was polluted. There was plastic, there was fuel. We don't want to use that debris. But now that most of that has been cleared up, whatever's left on your property, if you have some brush that was stashed away, or you have logs, or you have root wads, I'm sure there's plenty of organic debris we can repurpose. Now is the time to figure out what to do with that debris, anything that's left over. Now is the time to save anything. Like we're moving into the winter season, we'll start getting leaf fall. You'll start getting branches and things that drop. Anybody clearing a power line, any of the electrical companies clearing a power line, and they're going through and they have those trucks full of that mulch, try and save that. A lot of times that goes to the landfill. So if you see a power line company clearing a power line or right of way, ask them to bring that to your property. They will, because they generally have to pay for it to be discarded. That's good material that we want to save. So that's one thing we need to think of now. That's the first thing that is really important, is what to do with that debris. I don't know of any process currently, but that's what this group, I think, should probably focus on initially, is how to save that and accrue that.
So the amount of debris, am I correct in understanding that is 90% of this property is privately owned, where the debris is being removed? So this, for the private property owner, this information is just as important as well as the city. But I would love to find a way, and if the city is the person at the table with FEMA, then I'll figure out a way to, and with your help maybe, he just offered some help in being able to keep that. And you said you were going to have get the test back on this debris next week, so that'll be helpful. And I'm listening and taking notes and doing my best to try to. I'm one person, and in a table of many, who's probably saying, "Wait, hold on, let's do timeout." So, and I'm getting a lot of resistance about that, because people want to get things back to normal as fast as possible. So I understand.
So in my career, I was the sustainability advisor after Harvey, after Hurricane Michael, 78 million down trees across about 3 million acres in Florida. FEMA is pushing for nature-based solutions. They actually prioritize grant funding for these nature-based solutions. I agree 100% that this organic matter is very valuable. Casey just said getting the biomass back is critical, but right now we're shipping about 10,000 truckloads all the way to South San Antonio and paying a tipping fee. Keeping this material local, I've got farms and ranches between 1.5 miles away to 9 miles away. Up in the tops of the watershed, we can get that material out of the river, slow spread, sink, soak, and store the material down. And work that I've done at Camp Bullis has stopped all surface water runoff since 2010. So we can turn that flooding liability into a biologically filtered groundwater asset to revive these springs and make sure that we replenish our groundwater, which is the economic engines for these communities. That's why so many people were here on July 4th floods. So having this material hauled off because a Mr. George Ortiz at the TCEQ says it's polluted, I think is something that we can address. It's one person right now. TDM is okay with that. TDM actually gets a priority ranking for something like the FEMA BRIC program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, if we keep this material on site and put it to work to mitigate future flooding so we don't have to go through this disaster again. And I think we can incorporate that work into restoring the river, restoring the river shed, and replanting trees in a place where they're not subject to being washed out when there's another flood coming.
And sir, could you identify yourself, please?
My name is Brian Hummel, born and raised in San Antonio, went to Herman Son's summer camp throughout the entire 80s. I could have been one of those kids in 1987 washed away. And this is a passion of mine. I actually took this passion, I've been doing it in Bandera County for years. We're winning EPA Green Infrastructure Awards. FEMA is absolutely looking for this. I helped review 2 point something billion dollars of FEMA resilience funds in 2024, and I just resigned from the Environmental Protection Agency as a watershed protection expert, and now I want to come help my community.
There you go.
Thank you.
I just have an immediate, my name is Cindy Yankee, I'm with the Hunt Garden Club, and we do a lot of community projects in Hunt. Right now, right by Shoemaker's Crossing, I was just asking the forest people back here, there's an entire field of debris. They are shredding it and then they're hauling it away. I drive by it every single day. I don't know who to contact to be able to say, let's stop this and make it available to the homeowners.
George Ortiz at TCEQ, he's our regional lead. The person that I got a temporary approval from Amanda Butcher, B-U-C-H-E-R. She's the one actually on the TCEQ permits that allow them to do these temporary debris management sites. There's one in Centerpoint, there's one in Comfort, there's one at the Kerrville landfill, and I haven't been to the one in Hunt, but I've been to all those other three. This mulch is clean. I've smelled it, I've looked at it. There's maybe 1 or 2 pounds of trash per ton of material, but that trash was already in the river. That trash was already here. So, and if we keep it locally single grind, the chunks are big. I found whole shoes, I found a pot and pan, I found like pieces of water hose. There is trash in the mulch, period. There is trash in the mulch, yes, but it's in big chunks that can be taken out. If we ship it 1.2 million miles, 10,000 trucks, 150-mile round trip is 1.5 million miles. That's enough to go around planet Earth 60 times to get rid of the debris that we need in this community. And that's my personal and professional opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay. Michael, as a conservation botanist and voice for native plants, Michael has devoted his career to the conservation of native plants and habitats in Texas and beyond. He is currently the Vice President of Conservation and Collections at the San Antonio Botanical Gardens. During his time at the garden, he has established working partnerships with other like-minded organizations throughout Texas and the nation, instituted new conservation projects, and continued to solidify the garden's commitment to plant conservation in Texas. Previously working as a freelance botanist and consultant, he has designed and installed native plant gardens and performed a variety of plant surveys on both public and private lands, including rare plant surveys, plant inventories, wetland delineation, and ecological assessments. During his decade-long stint at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, he managed projects such as the Millennium Seed Bank Project, Floristic Survey of Big Bend National Park, Ferns of the Trans-Pecos, and a review of the aquatic invasives of Texas. In 2018, he published the field guide, Wildflowers of Texas, and is currently working on several other book projects, including Wildflowers and Other Plants of Western Texas. Michael has served on the executive board of the Native Plant Society of Texas, NSPOT, is currently the state botanist for the organization. He has served as co-president of the Big Bend chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas and is currently heavily involved with the International Oak Society, the Global Consortium for the Conservation of Oak, and serves as vice chair on the American Public Garden Association's Conservation Community. Y'all are busy guys. Mike, you're up.
Okay, well, I thought this was over at 10:30, so I have to go. That's quite the introduction, thank you.
You're welcome.
But I think the highlight of that should probably be the 10 years at the Wildflower Center working with the Seed Bank Project. I do know plants pretty well. I don't know aquatic systems as well as Casey, but for 7-ish years at the Wildflower Center, I managed the Millennium Seed Bank project. That was a statewide project to conserve the flora of Texas. We ended up collecting over 600 taxa throughout the state of Texas, each one of them about 40,000 seeds per collection. That was kind of on average, kind of averaging about 60 collections per year. So generally we were doing about 1.2 million seeds a year. So when people talk about collecting large amounts of seeds and you mention something like 10 or 20 or 50,000 seeds, that's nothing. So, I mean, that's very, very doable if you time it right.
But did you clean all those yourself?
We had volunteers.
Doesn't count.
We had volunteers. So yes, I'm here as the Vice President of Conservation and Collections for San Antonio Botanical Garden to speak about the Trees Initiative, which this came about in a vehicle drive up to Austin with some of our leadership team. And Andrew LeBay, our Vice President of Gardens, we had been talking about what we could do for the community here in Kerrville along the Guadalupe after the floods. And Andrew had brought up this idea, and it sort of has morphed, evolved, if you will, into what it is today. We had many meetings. We chatted with potential partners, other experts, et cetera, thought about the cost, everything that we could possibly think of, from land access to seed collections to the planting further down the line, of if we would be able to do this, because we are not going to take on a project that we would not think would be successful. And so here we are. So obviously we think it's going to be successful because I'm sitting in front of you. But the overriding goal is to plant 50,000 native trees minimum to basically to restore the habitat along the banks of the Guadalupe. There's a long list of partners, supporters. That list keeps growing. That's not everybody, I should say, but it seems like every day there's at least 3 new phone calls, whether that's people wanting to partner with us or landowners that are offering access. I've been very, very busy the past 3 weeks with phone calls. But when this came up, the first thing I'd mention was that if we were going to do this, we have to base it in ecology and conservation and not just plant what is technically native. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Ideally, I would want to collect from the Guadalupe watershed. We had secondary areas, which would be the Medina and the Upper Blanco. I wanted to make sure that whatever we collected was looked at as a conservation restoration collection, and that those genetics stayed within that watershed as close as possible. I am wanting to collect at least 50,000 seeds this season, which I think is completely doable on the 5 or so, the 4 properties I've already visited, but we have access to several more. There'll be one I'll be visiting today and another tomorrow. So this first year, ideally it's Taxodium, the bald cypress, and the sycamore. Those are the 2 primary plants that I want to collect. The secondary one for this year would be chinkapin oak. There's a whole list of other species that I'll sort of show you here in a second. What are our target species later on down the line. This is not a complete list. Just from experience, I know that we have to be very opportunistic. We can't say this is our recipe. We're just going to collect these 4 species. And over the next 2 years, for whatever reason, they don't have an adequate crop of seed in the target area that we want to collect from. So good news, yes for Taxodium, yes for the sycamore, the platanus there. We will be collecting both of those. I have found some populations that will be fine. We've already started collecting some of the quercus or the chinkapin oak, and there'll be some other ones that we'll probably collect this year as well. In addition to these, as we are out and what I'm seeing, I am planning on collecting other species. These are plants that we will collect. We will take them back to the garden, clean them, all that sort of good stuff, keep them in our seed bank for future use if they are, or when they are needed, not if, because this, in my career, every year this happens somewhere where, wow, I wish we had local genetics to do this sort of project. And so we're going to go ahead, as we're out, go ahead and make collections for these other taxa, have those in the seed bank, just in case we need them next year, 2 years down the line, whatever that may be. I should also mention, is anyone here from Hill Country Alliance?
Daniel sent a representative, and she's running late.
Okay. So I should, they're not here, but I will speak essentially not for them, but we are working closely with them. So every time I get a meeting with a landowner, I try to pass on Hill Country Alliance's immediate needs, which they are looking for access to land as well for their planting and their restoration projects that they're working on. And there are other plants that they are specifically looking for. Some of these may be the ones that Casey may end up growing. These are those graminoids, those grasses, sedges, rushes, and potential other herbaceous plants that they're looking to plant along that littoral system that Casey was talking about.
Littoral edge.
Littoral edge.
And littoral shelves.
I've known Casey for a while. And anyway, so those would be ones we're also helping them. So basically I see our role not only as the leader in the trees department, but also the facilitators and helping with that communication for these other organizations. So we do have collection protocols, and some of this is based upon my work from the Wildflower Center and the Millennium Seed Bank project. What is a population, Casey?
One plant.
No.
Depends.
It
depends.
So these are conservation restoration collections. So minimum, we're looking for 50 plants per population or location. One could argue, and I could also be that person that could argue this, that the bald cypress from the headwaters all the way down the Canyon Lake is one population because they are wind-pollinated species. That is probably true. However, what we are doing is we're looking at these sort of, whether you call them subpopulations or just locations, that when we take a look at a property, I want to make sure I can collect at least 50 individual plants that have mature seed. Ideally, I want to be up to 200. Why are we doing it that way? Throughout the range of bald cypress, which goes from basically the hill country all the way to the East Coast, if we collect 50 individuals and we distribute that collection evenly throughout each tree, we are guaranteed to get at least 95% of the genetic variability within that species. Does that make sense to everyone? So we're missing 5% of the genetic variability. But that 5% is incredibly important. That 5% will determine whether or not that plant can survive our droughts, which will be adapted to our soils, which will be adapted to our calcareous waters, our all of that, the winters, the summers, everything. If we're bringing in genetic material outside of its range, it's less likely to survive. And this is one of the reasons why, like, what we're doing and what we aim to do and will be doing is when we collect from a place, and that little center point there is on the upper Guadalupe River, North Fork, that round circle is 5 miles. So within that 5-mile range, we can plant most of the South Fork. Expand that out a little bit more to 15 miles, and you're on the other side of Kerrville. And so 15 miles has been our sort of general, it's like, this is as far as we're going to go. So this is just one site, and you can see with one collection from one population along that North Fork, we can replant the vast majority of that upper Guadalupe. So from Kerrville all the way up past Hunt. So, and I've written something in there, but basically, if you're doing a restoration project, you need to collect the plant material from the place you want to restore. That's what we're getting at. You're going to have the best success when it comes to that.
And what you're your seed bank is gonna have category, because this is a 30-mile stretch, so your seed bank's gonna have, this is cypress collected from North Fork, South Fork, Kerrville, Center Point.
Yep. I have another map that has all the dots, and we've done all that. So yeah, we can cover all the way from Canyon Lake, all the way up from our collection points. So that's ideal situation. There will be some exceptions to the rule. Chinkapin oak. Are we going to be able to collect from 50 individuals in a given population? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure on that. But there will be other exceptions like basswood, for instance, or some other random plants that we might want to introduce. Salix, not salix, walnut, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna, wrong audience. So walnuts may be another one that we're gonna be pulling in from a little bit further away, or they may not come from the exact 15 miles, but they will be from the watershed. So all of those. We are also looking at, if you saw some of those, we're looking at the taxodium, the sycamore, all that sort of good stuff, but we're also looking at doing some collections for that second shelf up when you get out of there, so a little bit more of the upland species. These are just some examples to give you all an idea. There you go, there's the 50 tree samples. All I need are 8 cones from a taxodium to reach that 10,000 seed mark. That's it.
How many seeds are in each cone?
25.
Okay.
So, something like that. Hope I did that right. So yeah, it goes pretty quick. To give you an idea, one sycamore can produce well over 10,000 seeds, viable seeds. Or I'm sorry, one cypress, one sycamore. 50,000. I don't know. I mean, it's insane. One of those little fruits has at least 100 seeds in them. So it goes pretty quick. But the idea also is when we're doing this, you don't want to look at one tree and say, we're going to collect, 300 cones from this one tree, then we're going to collect one from each of these down the road. Like you want to try to distribute that as evenly as possible when we're doing this. There's been some questions about volunteer assistance and helping with this. And yes, we will absolutely take volunteer help when we get to that point of seed collection, but at least this first year, we need to make sure that we're doing all this right. So we've had a lot of people contact me and say, hey, I can collect seeds from my trees out in front of my yard or wherever. And that's not what we're looking for at this point. Because one, they're probably not going to be collecting from 50 different trees. But if those trees were ever planted, we don't know where they came from. So once the collections are made, the seed's going to go back to San Antonio Botanical Garden. That's where we're going to use volunteers to help clean, process everything. We will get the 100 count seed weight on all the viable seed. We will then repackage those. Every seed collection will get its own unique ID, its own collection number. At that point, we will begin to distribute to the various nurseries that we have already identified that would have agreed to grow plants for us. Anything that's in excess, we will keep in our seed bank for future use. That could just be next year. The idea with propagation and using the local nurseries, and again, this is like after many discussions we had at the garden, is we want to use the local nurseries here, Kerr County, Central Texas. I think that many people here in the audience probably have already bought trees and plants from these people in the past. These are your neighbors, so it's sort of facilitating that. One, logistically, it makes sense to have them here locally, and two, it's returning some of that money back into the local economy. So having that money go through there. There will be a variety of sizes from plugs to probably 1 gallons or even further down the years, 5 gallons or larger. But every tree, I should mention, every tree when we do this, so the seeds are going to a nursery, they're getting a tracking number. It's that unique ID number for each population. The nurseries have to keep track of that because when we bring that back, we want to make sure like we're getting the trees that we collected from the North Fork that's going to the South Fork. So I'm not going to get into all of the logistics in that because it can get pretty complicated when you're dealing with 5 or 10 different collections and you're dealing with 14 different nurseries, but it'll work out.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm learning more about native versus not. So I assume if you're collecting these seeds, these are trees that were there, but I've been told by some that the bald cypress, for instance, is not a native tree. Now, so do we use that as a guideline when we're?
Who told you that?
Actually, one of our retired county commissioners, Jonathan. So I'm just learning. I'm not saying it's true or not. I
Yeah.
just was curious.
Well, without getting into the genetics of Taxodium, which is, I'm not going to use the word I want to use because this is being recorded, it's complicated. So bald cypress, so if you look at Flora of North America and some other institutions, there are some notes, and there are some people, botanists, that believe, and it depends on how you read the genetics, that Taxodium, the genus, and Distichum, the species, is all one plant, one species from the east coast of the United States all the way down into Mexico. As an ecologist, field botanist, that is not true. There's at least 3 in North America, north of Mexico. So that's Ascendens, which can occur in Texas, over in southeast Texas. Distichum, which is our bald cypress, which you definitely see in East Texas. When you get to the hill country, it gets weird. And we have Mucornatum, which is the giant tree that's down in Mexico. It's called the Montezuma cypress, known to occur along the Rio Grande Valley, down in the Southern Valley. But it's always been known that the plants here in Central Texas are a little weird. What's going on with them? It's probably a hybrid mix of genetics. The ones in Mexico, the Montezuma cypress, those are mostly growing on limestone. We have limestone, so it's starting to make a little bit of sense. When you get over into East Texas, you're on more acidic soils. And so that's one of the reasons why you definitely do not want to be planting plants from acidic soils into our limestone. Like, that's not a really good mix.
Okay.
So is the bald cypress from East Texas native? No. I'm going to do air quotes, bald cypress from Central Texas native? Yes. But is it a true bald cypress? And there are people working on it currently as we speak, and it's probably going to come out to be either a hybrid or a subspecies between the two. Yeah, it can be very complicated.
We know that 200, 300, 400 years ago there were bald cypress here. So
Right.
there you go.
They're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cypress were here, but are they the bald cypress from East Texas? No. Addition to, so looking forward into the next year, 2026. Again, we had to hit the ground running this year, so there wasn't a whole lot of time to do things like outreach or training, or we didn't have the luxury of time to do this project. Like if I would have known about doing seed collection a year ago, things would have been much different. But going into next year, we're looking at the presentations and workshops, the how-tos, the trainings, all that sort of stuff. And part of that is, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but when we're recording or when we're collecting these plants and making these collections, we're not just collecting seed and walking away. Every collection is going to have a ton of data collected with it. So from associated species to, of course, GPS coordinates, to the size of the population, to the estimated number of seed in the whole population, to everything we can possibly do. We have forms for this. So all of that data will be very important later on when we're reestablishing some of these plants, or who knows, in 15 or 20 years, somebody else is going to want to look at that and see like what it was like when we're collecting the seeds in a sort of healthy habitat. So that will be further down the line. And then planting, eventually, we're looking at the earliest would be fall to winter of next year. That depends on the growth, the sites, et cetera, et cetera. We are doing site identification. I have met with some folks that have given us sort of the verbal okay. Yes, we would absolutely love to have you come here. This is a place on the South Fork that was heavily damaged. This is the view of Camp Mystic. Each site is probably going to be different. It's not going to be, 25% taxodium, 25% sycamore, and then 50% of these other 10 or 15 trees. Some places may be heavily planted with sycamore. Others may be more dominant in some other taxa. It really just depends on what the site is like. Andrew LeBay, he's the one that's going to be heading up most of this at this point. We're looking at various forms of tree protection, how to make sure that they don't get damaged. Ideally, many of the sites will have either city folks or county folks or state folks or even private property folks that are willing to go out and make sure these plants get watered. Some places will need that. Others may not have that. That's that aftercare we're hoping for. You would probably imagine that the places where if you had somebody there that had the ability to make sure that these plants were watered, make sure that they were caged, make sure that deer didn't get into that cage, all of those things that could happen, those plants are going to have a better chance of survival than the ones that you just throw on the ground and kind of hope for the best. I would hope that some of the landowners, the private property owners, as we're moving forward, would be open to having more volunteers come on their property and assist with some of this. So maybe it can take some of the pressure off of their staff or their family or whomever that may be. Eventually, we will be doing some monitoring as well. And these are the photo points that Casey was talking about. And this is seeing changes over time, seeing what was successful. We're obviously going to be learning from all of this that we do. There will be some aspects that we're going to do that will definitely work, and we'll definitely have failures, absolutely. But through all this, we'll be doing data collection, and we'll be able to revisit all this data, see what we can do with it later on when it does happen again, as Casey mentioned.
Y'all can do your own photo points, though. You don't have to rely on him.
No, you don't. So, additional collections and plantings. So I had given you that list of that secondary, but there's also tertiary things. As this moves forward, as Casey's talking about, this project is scalable. Once you hit that 3-year mark and you're starting to see successes, what else is it that we can do out there? We have, there's numerous species that we can plant that can assist that ecology and those habitats. So we're just going to keep moving forward with this, as long as there's that interest and the funding's available to keep replanting, keep planting more diversity that Casey alluded to first. Ideally, in a true sort of restoration ecology situation, we would try to have as much diversity as possible. But like I said, at this point in time, we don't have that luxury. But in 3 years, we probably will. And I think, last one. This is just a summary of what I was talking about, but there's a timeline down there with our monitoring and everything else. And, questions, but I think the questions are going to be for everybody.
Any questions for any of our panel? Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Lori Schreiner. I'm in an area now that has all the gravel, and my question is, I think that's such a great idea about putting the mulch on the gravel, but if my gravel has migrated and closed up a water area, do you try to get that gravel removed or pushed onto the other gravel, or
So once we get out of emergency declaration, are we still in emergency declaration? Okay. So I would get with Parks and Wildlife. I don't know what the law is within emergency declaration. The judge probably knows. But once you get out of emergency declaration, you have to get a permit through Parks and Wildlife to dredge and move that material.
I was just curious.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's all
you can't. There's a possibility that the river will take care of it itself as it finds that channel back. It was just a temporary situation. It could be permanent. If you don't want it there, I would not revegetate and maybe let it erode eventually on its own and revegetate, areas where you want to be stable. So I mean, yeah, not knowing the site, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know if that helped your question, your answer.
Please identify yourself, sir.
Hey, Ryan.
Ryan Miller, Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Oh, Ryan has the answer to your question.
Well, I don't have the answer to your question specifically because each site's going to be different and how the river is able to process that material based on the load, the location, the position on the landscape, all of that. But with respect to permits, the emergency declaration, as I understand it, that applies to the people that are operating under the FEMA authority and under TDM. So once you give right of access and they're operating in there, they do have some ability to move materials around to assist with both the removal of the material, but also the search and rescue operations. With respect to individual landowners, the emergency declaration has not changed the law. However, our game wardens have been given what we're calling discretionary enforcement. So if landowners are doing something to repair infrastructure, water intakes, driveways, and they need to move material around, our wardens are exercising discretion and saying, we understand that people need to get their homes back up in order. If it is excavating gravel out of the riverbed to return it to a pool-like condition, because that's where you recreate, that is something that may not be
It's not
considered
for recreation, I just
Right.
noticed it just had come over and it's kind of like a stagnant water
Sure.
sinking, so it had changed. I was just curious. I'm not gonna do anything.
Yeah, and I don't issue those permits. I don't have anything to do with regulatory nexus, but
Right.
it's just a good idea to contact Parks and Wildlife and say, would I be okay to do this before I start, messing around in the street bed?
Right.
It's very likely if you don't want it there, then I would just leave it alone, and it probably will erode itself back out and find itself again.
Or eventually become assimilated as this
Right,
process of
yeah.
ecological succession,
Yeah.
plants will eventually become established and assimilated, or floods will move, future lower intensity floods will move some of that material. But again, it just depends on how much material and where it is on the landscape.
Sir.
So I'm Michael Hornis with the City of Kerrville. One of the questions that we posed to Parks and Wildlife Sand and Gravel was for the debris and search and rescue teams that have gone out there and made gravel roads where there were none, can we restore those back to where they were prior to? And so we've initially gotten like, yeah, that's going to be okay, or it's going to be, try not to do too much disturbance, but it wasn't there, then was created. Right, and so can we uncreate that? Because I know the river's just going to do what the river's going to do when it floods and it creates new streams, new gravel beds, etc. But for the areas where they created new roads, undoing those, and so we're trying to mitigate that in the city where we are.
Yes, sir.
Brian Hummel, I got another quick question. It's a two-part question. Have any of you heard of the low-tech process-based restoration and all the free resources from Utah State University? Do you think good or bad?
I think some of it is applicable to Central Texas. I think a lot of it, I don't know, that's 50-50, maybe 60-40, what's applicable and what's not.
And second part question, with all the deer that are in this community that go down and eat out of this wonderful salad bar, now the salad bar's been moved along, do you think it's reasonable to invite people from the surrounding communities to bring their hunting dollars to hunt and fill up their coolers so that we reduce the browse pressure on all these young plants we're trying to get back to the river? Because if the deer, which the population is already high and their salad bar is gone, every little green shoot that comes up in our river is going to get munched down immediately. And if we want our river to recover, it seems like we need to have our deer population down considerably, like immediately.
I can tell you immediately, browsing pressure herbivory is the #1 issue on revegetation projects. What do y'all want to do with that? Just
Yeah, and you're not the first person to bring that up.
So marketing opportunity for the folks that are trying to bring money back into your communities. You know, come hunt and hunt to help us restore the river.
Any other questions?
Sure. Does the emergency aspect, for anyone that's wanting to get started on a restoration, I mean, is there anything preventing folks from getting started? Like the emergency part of this, or? No?
I don't know. Ryan? Judge?
Judge?
Is there anything? I mean, as far, yeah?
Regular regulatory processes that you would have to undertake, contacting your local county floodplain administrator to make sure that if you're adding any material to that you're not elevating the floodplain. Usually regular restoration materials don't have an impact, and they just green light it. If there's other local construction ordinances or authorities, just check with the city. But then, if you're adding fill to the channel, then it may require coordination with Army Corps of Engineers for 404 Clean Water Act. And then if you're removing or disturbing sediment within the channel, that's coordination with Texas Parks and Wildlife. But other than that, if you're planting, if you're moving woody debris on the landscape, adding mulch, those are just normal activities that you as a landowner have discretion.
And I would advise, if you're wanting to do things faster than next year, to contact Hill Country Alliance, because they are looking for willing landowners that they can work with. So.
And one of the other things is, we do want to do some pilot. I think it's good to think of doing some pilot projects. So if you're ready to go and you got a spot you want to get planted, we can do we can round up enough plants to do a couple of small pilot projects.
And if you're interested in more of the restoration type activities, basic land management strategies that promote restoration, getting ahead of their larger scale planting, Hill Country Alliance and Texas Parks and Wildlife and Steve Nelly are hosting 3 workshops to be announced in November to get more into detail about the types of processes that Casey talked about with riparian function, but also some restoration and land management strategies that can promote recovery. So those will be coming up.
Anything else?
One more back to Michael. You're getting them to local nurseries, growers.
Yep.
As far as I know, there's only one in Kerr County. Is that fair?
Yeah, but we're also down in Medina County, but it's really Hill Country local.
Those would be wholesalers. So then, then how do the young trees then? Is that teaming the contractor, or does your company come and plant the stuff?
Well, we would be doing the organization, the logistics of planting, but so we're also currently raising funds to be able to make sure that all of those nurseries get paid for what they're doing, and so there's no cost to the landowner, whoever that may be. So it's really to make sure that the nurseries are getting paid, but it's the funds that are being raised are covering that. So again, you would just have to make sure that you're speaking with me or somebody with Hill Country Alliance. Like, yes, I would absolutely love to have trees planted at some point. And if you're a landowner that's like, and yeah, I'd want one of my property to be part of the long-term monitoring project. And again, we'd have to look at access and all that sort of stuff. But there's not every property we plant on is going to be monitored long-term. So we just don't have the personnel to do that. But we will need a handful of those. So reach out to me. My email's on that flyer over there, or the folks at Hill Country Alliance. We're all working together. We just have Hill Country Alliance is more of that sort of immediate graminoid deed, whereas we're looking about a year from now before we begin planting. And it's probably going to be early 2027, just given the size of the trees.
I had a thought. I don't know if it's a question, but it seems to me there's so many maps. There's maps for everything. So what I would love to see, and I know this is private property, but it would also be nice to know what does our river look like now? I've seen parts of it, but I haven't seen the whole river. What has really changed? I mean, you could probably not even have seen it before and know, wow, that's a new mound of gravel, and that's a new pool of water. So it would be nice to know if the big picture where are our pockets of most concern? Where will be our most challenging areas? What are some ideas for those? Instead of kind of bit and piece, your property, just kind of put it together.
There is somebody doing, I'm gonna look up his name right now.
Somebody, I believe, is doing aerial.
Yeah, it's Clint Carter. So he's provided us, so apparently, and I didn't know this, but there are very recent images of the river since after the flood. And he's gone through and has taken points and compared that with Google Earth images.
So how do I get in touch or get?
I can give you his email. He's with
Is it Clinton Carter or
Bandera?
Bandera.
Bandera.
And groundwater.
Yeah.
Groundwater.
But yeah, he would be the person to contact, and but that's there.
May I add just a brief something to that? My name is Rebecca with Hill Country Alliance, and that document is housed in the Kerr Together Long-Term Recovery.
Oh, is it? Okay.
River Working Group folder. So if you have access to that, then you have access to that, and I'm happy to email.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm familiar with Kerr Together, so I'll get it.
He did think.
Any other questions? Then I would ask, Michael has already done this, but Barry, would you start by letting people know how you like to be contacted?
Sure. We're at treesforhouston.org. We're obviously on the internet, and you can just email or call us, and any inquiries about Hill Country stuff will come directly to me or our Special Projects Director for Trees for Texas. So any resource plug that you all feel like we might be able to help you fill, let us know, and if we can, we'll help.
Thank you. And Casey, how do people find you?
CW1107@gmail.com. That's my private email. And like I said, if you have any questions on plant ID, aquatic plant ID, just let me know. I work with Ryan too, and I work with Michael. So we all are kind of probably working together on this project. So my expertise is generally those aquatic littoral plants. I'll probably be growing some of those for river restoration later. But if you have any general questions on river biology or you want extra information, just let me know. Fishes, I don't know much about mussels, but there's some endangerments.
And Michael, you've already given us how to contact you, and you referred to another gentleman who's going to head up. What was his name?
Andrew LeBay. He's on the sheet as well.
Okay.
So both of our email addresses are there.
Okay.
So
Well,
both be reached via email.
thank you. It's always good to have options, isn't it? And I think a lot of options are on the table, a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge. I thank our panel for coming on their own to help our county. I thank the city for hosting us. And I'll close with one little personal note. For over 60 years, I have driven the roads of this county, and I've played a little game with the river and the trees. The cypress are your first sign that things are changing, and I always try to beat them to the punch when they begin to change, because the river changes then. I have loved this land. I thank you for loving it from afar and in person. And thank you for helping us. It is a wonderful place to live. And those trees, they do tell a story. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Appreciate it.